Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. Yep, that's right. Get ready because I'm about to mess up another name. Hopefully not. Welcome, John Mollura.
Got it, brother.
Boom. All right.
Yeah, starting off on a high note, Peaches. We should probably just wrap now.
Really
leave on a high note. Let's wrap
All right,
this
everybody,
up.
make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
That's right.
Train
Smash
hard.
that subscribe button.
Just absolutely destroy that subscribe button.
Don't caress it.
Don't caress it. Absolutely just smash it.
Yeah. Well, John, appreciate you joining us. Thanks. I mean, it's awesome to have you. You've got quite a colorful story. Like it's wild to me how you were a rocket scientist, then went, okay, well, I'm going to be a professional photographer. And now you're a professional speaker going around talking about, defeating imposter syndrome and all that kind of good stuff. Like, tell us about this path.
Yeah. Colorful is one way to describe it. I usually use other adjectives. Sitting around having a beer.
I would say I had a colorful past as well, or where I'm at now too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that was your chance too, John. So we were at like 1 minute and 15 seconds in. You could have just sent that F-bomb right away and you could have beaten Trent. That would have been great.
I'm the FNG. I didn't want to step on any toes right after you Trent the shot. But totally had a having, just I always say I Forrest Gump my way through life, especially the first part, because my initial plan, which I wanted to always do, I always wanted to be in the military, and had a birth defect DQ me. I found out when I was in high school. So I was kind of left like, well, crap, now what do I do? And probably had some guidance counselor be like, hey, John, you're decent at math and science. You should go to engineering school. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So got accepted to Penn State University, struggled my way through engineering school. Felt like the dumbest person in the room for a number of years, which that didn't go away after I graduated. And actually fell into the job doing test operations for a NASA Department of Defense and Homeland Security subcontractor. And the wild way I fell into that job is, I would say, it revolves around mice. People are always like, what the hell does a mouse have to do with anything? And backing up, when I was a junior in college, I was down to one of the finalists to have an internship with Disney, like the Disney. And thought it was a lock, didn't have a plan B, and that fell through. And when I got the call, this is back in the 90s, so like when I hung the phone up on the wall, my buddy happened to walk in my room. He's like, you all right, bro? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And, long story short, he worked for a Boy Scout camp, like a 14,000 acre reservation, and said, hey, we have this big place where we need instructors, specifically a water sports instructor. You're outdoorsy. You want to come work there? And I'm like, I don't know crap about water sports, man. He's like, we'll train you. It's cool. Don't worry. And I said, I'm not a Boy Scout. I don't wear goofy green shorts. I don't wear tall socks. And he said, don't worry. It's not that bad. So went up there, worked with the maintenance crew, because I had time till I went to schooling, for training. And being the unskilled guy, you can imagine I got all the like awful jobs. I was like schlepping everybody's tools through the woods and, dropping stuff off when they forgot it. And one of my jobs, the most glamorous job, this is part 2 of the mouse of that year. So Disney already ditched me. Mickey already screwed me over. The other job I had was, the official title was de-winterizing.
Nice. You had to kill rats. You were doing Charlie work, so you have a complicated history with mice.
I didn't have to kill them, Aaron. They were unfortunately previously deceased months ago. Because
they weren't in there smoking. Hey, John, they're waiting for you.
Yeah, right. No, they had fallen into the toilets, Peaches, and had been laying drowned in the toilet for God knows how long.
Oh, good.
My job was to pull them out so the plumbing didn't get jammed up. And I'm like, all right, well, I just have to endure this for a couple weeks. I'm going to be, David Hasselhoff, driving speedboats, teaching people how to water ski. Life's going to be good. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen.
Spoiler alert, right to the end. Normally, at this time, we tell people, hey, if you don't want to do this, stay in school. you were
Right.
on your way to becoming a rocket scientist, so that's
Well,
not going to really hold any weight.
Yeah, well, I was like, well, I'm definitely not dropping out now. Yeah, and
right.
rocket scientry, what if that's even word rocket scientry?
It is
That
now.
working for the space for it is now.
Yeah.
That wasn't even on my radar, dude. Again, I didn't have a plan. I was just trying to get through to the next thing. So I've been pulling dead mice out of toilets. I was scrubbing rust off propane tanks. That was another one of my jobs. I'm like, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get, this tech school, if you will, learn how to do all this stuff, teach the water sports. And they come up as I'm scrubbing rust off propane tank. They're like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, good. I'm leaving for school tomorrow. I'm out of here. They're like, yeah, about that. And I'm like, what? They said the guy who did it last year, he's coming back. So it doesn't make sense to have two of you there. So the maintenance crew is really impressed with your work ethic, John. And I'm like, God damn it.
That's it.
Dang my Western PA work ethic. They're like, they would love to keep you on. I just have visions now of like, cleaning out septic tanks at 1 a.m. and all the other stuff. They said, or you could teach rock climbing. You could be the director of rock climbing. We'll train you. I'm like, I'll do it. They're like, would you want to hear about it? I went, nope. I said, sign me up. They're like, are you scared of heights? I said, hell yeah. See you later. I'm packing my bags. So taught rock climbing all summer. It was awesome. Fell in a new groove, got to lead a great group of people. And all that to tell is that's actually how I ended up working in the space program. Because when I graduated, a company, this NASA's contractor, sent a thing out to all the graduating engineers. My buddies and I were sitting around drinking beer and wings one night. And they said, hey, did you see that thing from that NASA company? They're like, we should all apply. They're like, let's do it. And I'm like, all right, cool. So I apply thinking, crickets. Nope. They wanted to have an interview with me. And I'm like, they're like, you got an interview? I'm like, yeah, that's okay. I'm sure I won't make it past the first thing.
Yeah, they'll figure out who I am. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Once they know who I am, they're going to say this is not a good fit. So I was talking to the guys on a phone interview, and this is before video conference. So like, I'm just like, winging it on the phone. And they said, what is this about rock climbing? And I gave my spiel, like, because I thought showed leadership is on my resume. Like, I led a staff. I didn't kill anybody. I thought, that was good. And they said, hang on, someone wants to talk. We have someone you need to talk to. They put me on mute. And I'm like, okay. And it's like silent. Then all of a sudden it comes off mute. This gravelly voice comes on, doesn't introduce himself, and goes, hey, what do you think about rock climbing on Mars? And me being a prolific smartass, I just immediately retort, I go, are you going to pay my airfare? And then I'm like, oh, I just totally blew it.
Right.
But this dude goes, get him down here. And like disappeared. That was it. They're like, all right, well, that was Skip Wilson, our director of test operations. He would apparently like to meet you. So let's schedule a meeting. And I guess we can forget about the project management job you were interviewing about. He wants to talk to you about test operations.
Ooh.
So came to find out, this will be near and dear to your heart. This guy Skip was a former PJ in Vietnam, and then went on to be a SEER instructor. And then, when he retired in the late 80s, he was in test operations out of Edwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So this guy Skip, they would go out into the field and test all these things at various facilities, and he saw in my resume that I had moderate intelligence. But more importantly, he said, I don't need some egghead. I need someone who I can send out into the field anywhere in the planet and not get themselves or someone else killed. No one puts rock climbing on their resume. He's like, that's badass. He's like, you're not sitting behind a desk. And that's how I fell into the space program. So, all these things that, seemingly were defeats and, didn't go according to plan, they all just kind of worked out. But the key is, always being willing to retool or reevaluate. So that's how I ended up working in the space program for 15 years.
Off of putting rock climbing on your resume. I mean, but it shows that what they valued. It wasn't all the mathematical skills. It was, I mean, obviously they valued that for that one portion, for that sector. It was you being able to think on your feet, problem solve, and probably that physical aspect of it as well, because you know the physiological impacts of rock climbing and doing that kind of outdoor exploration kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always give
Did
him
you
a
get
lot of
Elvis
credit
leg
for,
on Mars? On Mars, you know, like
what's that?
what, can you like climb a 514 on Mars with the gravity, or how does that work? I don't know.
Guys, listen,
Might be a little bit
obviously
easier.
I'm the resident expert, okay? So I will handle
Oh
all
my
rock
gosh.
climbing. I'm the worst climber too, by the way. I just want to put that out there. Like I am terrified of heights, and medium heights get me the worst. You know, people say,
yeah.
"Oh, I can't jump out of a plane because I'm scared of heights." Those are different. It's
Right,
different when
different.
you're looking out of a
things.
plane. When I'm like 50 feet up, hanging on something that I've tied myself, I have never been, more sure that I was trying to kill myself than those times.
Yeah.
I am the safest guy on that rock. I will tell you that right now, because I'm
You're just
tied in,
geckoed right to it.
just tied into multiple locations. I got somebody that's belaying me. Sometimes I'm just walking. I'm just tied into somebody. It's just a whole
And
thing.
he's yelling at people like they need to be safer and all that kind of stuff.
Like they're like, guys, we're in the parking lot. Aaron, we are just putting our backpacks on. I'm like, well, they're heavy backpacks.
You are walking on belay, Aaron.
On belay all the time. And I make somebody say it back. I'm like, oh, belay. And they're like, fine, I'm right
Fine,
here.
all right.
Jeez, Louise.
Belay on.
Yeah, jeez, fine.
So you didn't go to Mars though.
I didn't. Yep. So, fun fact, someone pointed this out. Mars is a planet entirely inhabited by robots.
100%.
Right?
As far as we know.
Yeah,
Well.
nice, Trent. Good.
Oh.
That's for another podcast, but nice.
I mean,
Right, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
we
can't
say
talk
things with
about that. We're
finality.
gonna have to edit this out.
Yeah, yes. Sorry.
Oh, we like to have alien conversations on here. We believe.
We are the aliens.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
It's a heck of a point. So, John, what were the first projects that you were working on? So you got into the space program, and you worked there for 15 years. And obviously, I want to talk. You got another Air Force, connection. This is kind of woven through your entire story. You ended up working on the F-35 and some other projects. But as you got into that very first job, and you've kind of alluded to it, and I can see the theme as it gets to where you are now. You got there, you just happened into it. You had a good conversation, and having those connections almost always works out better than education. But kind of as you got into those first couple years at NASA, what were you working on? When was the first time that you were like, oh no, I might not belong here?
Yeah. So when I walked in the door my first day, I just graduated college. I walked in, wearing a shirt and tie, which I think that was the last time I wore a shirt and tie for the next 15 years. It was all Carhartts and t-shirts after that. I walked in, set my email up, and they said, we're leaving for test operations for the Spirit and Opportunity Mars rovers that were landing in 2003. This is 2001. And I was at BWI Airport within 4 hours and put on a plane and sent to a test facility where they could mimic the Martian atmosphere, testing airbags, the landing systems for the Spirit and Opportunity Mars rovers in 2003. And after doing that and getting my feet under me, that much, I'm sure, like what you guys get involved with, like the people that can hang, like they bubble to the top pretty quick, So I could hang, and they put me in charge then of another project landing on Mars in 2003 as a UK project called the Beagle Mars mission. And they put me in charge of that. Like I'd been at the company like 9 months, right out of school. And that caused intense anxiety because the leadership of the company would be like, hey, if you screw up these tests and they cancel the project, like there are people that are going to lose their job. Do not F this up. And that like kicked off a lot of anxiety, which I had wrestled with for a lot of my life. But when I got put in charge of that, I'm like, I do not deserve to be doing this. And, just kept rising to the challenges and learning, and, eventually got the mission off. But yeah, that was probably the first time, Aaron, where I was just like, I am way in over my head, and didn't have a lot of like mentorship because we were high speed. We were never around. We were always at some test facility or doing integration trials or on-site customer stuff. So I never really was able to develop that skill of asking for help, saying like I'm drowning. But there was also a lot of ego where I didn't want to raise my hand and be like, hey, I'm having trouble hacking this. So I kept it to myself, and it just eventually snowballed into like major like panic attacks, developed some unhealthy lifestyles that, in an effort to try to cope, which, spoiler alert, they didn't work.
What?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, unhealthy lifestyles don't work.
But we call it medicating. Self-medicating works, right?
Yeah,
Because
right.
Yeah,
I'm a
exactly.
doctor.
Right. Yeah. So that, but those weren't new feelings. Those were feelings that had been present all my life and just really ratcheted up, to extraordinary levels during that time of my life, Aaron.
Well, John, is that one of the things that made you successful, though? Because like the way I see these things is I have like some anxiousness about me all the time, and always feeling like I'm not going to make it, and always catastrophizing to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And as you keep going through this process, it's like if I would have asked for help, and I would have slowed down, would I have been successful still? Like, you don't know, but like that's the question, right? Is this thing a thing that made me successful in this endeavor, or did I just destroy 3 years off the end of my life for no good reason?
Yeah, and that's something, obviously, you need to keep challenging yourself, and you're always going to have a little bit of trepidation, that anxiety, that's good. That lets you know you're pushing yourself and you're getting out of your comfort. But what really, looking back on, and there's nothing I can do about it now, what it did was it robbed a lot of the joy that I should have experienced whenever I'd reach a milestone or complete something that I thought there's no way in hell I'd be able to do. A story I always talk about when I'm giving my talk on imposter syndrome is I was one of the leads on a missile defense project, and was the lead for a couple years on it, and the work went so well, we were actually recognized as civilians with multiple letters of commendation from the DoD, which was pretty cool. And I can remember just standing on the stage getting ready to be given my letter of commendation from the president of the company, and all of a sudden this like fear, like bad fear, like just came from the pit of my stomach. I almost started crying. Someone's like, "Oh, are you so excited?" I'm like, in my head, I was like, this is the moment where they're going to look at my name on this piece of paper and realize, John, you've been BSing everybody. You actually don't deserve this. Because I just had this just vision that I didn't deserve it. I shouldn't be there, despite what we were doing, what we built and what we worked on. It was out doing its thing successfully where it needed to be doing it. And it's actually still doing it to this day, over 20 years later. So, Trent, to your point, it's okay to have anxiety and get that nervousness, because that lets you know you're pushing the boundary. But what's it robbing you of? That's why I always talk about imposter syndrome's a thief, that feeling like a fake. It's a thief. It's gonna steal your joy.
Yeah, and I can't help but think about too, like the steps you took along the way, where maybe you could have like helped, right? Like, I don't know mistakes I've made in the past, right? When you go from personal performance to being in charge of something, that's when that's when things tend to go wrong, because we're very much do everything ourselves type of people,
right?
And then when you have a staff and you don't want to ask for help and you want things done your way, and instead of delegating and relying on the talents and the knowledge of the people on your team, you kind of do more than you should. And then, you spend, 20 hours a day working, and, it leads to all these other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a skill that needs to be learned. And that's where it's so important, especially, men that have worked through our various careers like we have, to turn around, and like help the next people in line and teach them and steward that, and be like, hey, look here. Yeah. Here are some stumbling blocks where I've hit, and really just be a guide and a shepherd to those people, and set the tone for it's okay to get that kind of, input to you, not set it up where it's like, you got to be some, lone wolf Rambo kind of guy that just, does it on your own and can take out a, Hind helicopter with a thumbtack and a rubber band. Like, that looks cool in the movies, but
sometimes it needs to be done.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you need to just do it on your own, but or take down, thing with a rubber band, a thumbtack.
They were
drew
Russians,
first
John.
blood.
Yeah,
they drew first blood.
First blood.
I think that was second.
That's right.
Blood,
the sheriff is
third.
the bad guy now. Or actually, the colonel is.
Exactly.
Thank you.
The colonel was.
I mean, he just reached out to his boy. Well, and speaking of someone reaching out, right, or realizing what went wrong, you're obviously here. You've been successful. At what point during this process did you realize that you needed maybe to reach out for somebody, or realized you had a problem that allowed you to get past that and get to where you are today?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I can tend to have a bit of a thick head, you know, and which I'm sure no one else on this call can relate to at all.
Nope.
I pretty much had to hit rock bottom emotionally. And that kind of came in the form of like a 1-2 punch. So, you know, I'd been working in this job at this point now for over 7 years, had a lot of professional success, of which I thought I wasn't worthy of any of it. You know, I just be on to the next thing. And in 2008, my wife and I, we had our first child. And one of the core things that I had such anxiety about, you know, due to unprocessed trauma, you know, coming to realize later, was, you know, I just had this core fear that I was going to let the people that cared about me, let them down. And we just had our first child, and my wife, like, she's like, I got to get out of the house, dude. And I said, kid's sleeping, go to Walmart, walk around, you know, because, you know, I'm a baller. I like to tell my wife, you know, go ahead, spend some quality time.
Go spend something. Yeah,
Go
don't
take
spend
care
it
of
all in
yourself.
one place.
City's got nothing on me. Go get yourself something nice.
From Walmart.
Yeah, right. But so anyway, so my wife's out. This is the first time I've left home alone with my daughter. I'm like, there's a bottle, no problem. Daughter wakes up, won't take the bottle, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but I had such angst about being a father due to my own stuff. When my daughter started crying and I knew my wife wasn't going to be home for an hour or two, it like just spooled me up into this like panic cycle. It's like, oh my God, all these fears that I've had all my life that I'm going to be an awful father. I'm not going to be able to take care of the people I love. You know, this like little 5-pound human, you know, spooled that up. So that put me in a lot of panic attacks kind of thing for the next few months, ratcheted up the anxiety. And, you know, when you're a new father, you get like 45 minutes of sleep at a clip, you know, for months at a time. So that does nothing. I was traveling extensively. They sent me to Antarctica during this time, which was a pretty boss trip, you know, side note.
Of course.
So that was the first thing. And then a couple months later, one of my best childhood friends who, an Air Force vet, you know, he unfortunately became one of the 22 a day. And he was not only a friend, I looked up to him like a big brother. Like he was a year ahead of me in school. He was able to go into the military, which I shared before was always a dream of mine. And when we lost him, I couldn't function. Like I was just in this habitual fog. And I just remember like I'm a problem solver, right? Like that's what I do. That's what my job is. And I can't get my crap together. I can't focus. I'm just in this habitual fog. And I can remember a few weeks after we lost him, I was standing just in my bathroom and I'm like, I don't know how to go on. You know, the coping mechanisms I mentioned before, you know, they really weren't helping now. They were making things worse probably. And I just remember thinking like, I don't know how to go on. I don't know if I want to go on. Like this sucks. And at that moment, I chose to pray, which the reason why that was a big deal was after I graduated Catholic high school, like I wanted nothing to do with religion. Like I stiff-armed it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I used to tell people like, oh, you go to church or you go to synagogue or whatever. It didn't matter what religion they were. I'm like, what, are you too weak to do life on your own? Like I was an a-hole about it. But I was like, all right, I have no other cards to play here. I'm just going to say the serenity prayer, you know, give me the strength, courage, and wisdom. And that moment of brokenness, like when I finished that prayer, which I hadn't prayed in 15 years, like I just felt this warm sensation come over me. I'm like, I've either just lost my flipping mind, like I finally cracked up, or maybe there is something to this God thing. And that gave me a basis to kind of push off of rock bottom. And the first thing I did was I started looking at how I was showing up in the world. And, you know, I had all these accolades. I had this, you know, kind of superhero reputation at work, because if there was a potentially hazardous project or mission, like my hand was up, my team and I, we were going. Looking back on it, it's because I was trying to give myself some self-worth. It wasn't that I was like, okay, we can handle this, we can make it happen. It's like, I want to feel good about myself. I want to give myself some value. So we're going to do the difficult things. Well, every time we came back successful, I just put my head back down and be on to the next thing. So I started realizing I was defending this like superhero kind of persona I had developed in my industry by just being an absolute jerk, because I had such little self-confidence for real. Like inside, like I was falling apart, guys. And like if anyone would like say anything that would challenge me, or I'd feel like it was making me look bad, or like even just like be like, have you thought about this, John? Like, man, I would just like use like my sarcasm and wit to just cut the legs out from under them.
Have you thought about shutting up? How about that?
That probably used one of those. Yeah. So that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm an asshole. And started really turning the light on myself. Like I was a test engineer. My life was ruled by data, right? So I started getting data on how I was showing up, and I'm like, man, this is not good. So I started, just doing the, Anthony Trucks, who's a podcaster and a speaker that I follow, talks about doing the dark work, that work that you do on yourself in the dark so you can actually shine whenever you get it together. So I started really figuring out what was triggering me, what kind of conversations, what situations. And, it took years where I would just change how I eventually would react. I worked on responding instead of reacting to things. Made a lot of apologies. I was like, man, I feel like I'm in like some 12-step program. I'm like apologizing to everybody. So that was the turning point in 2009. It was just from a place of just such brokenness that I'm like, something's got to give.
Did you shit can those kind of bad or poor coping mechanisms at the same time too, or did you carry those through until you kind of had that realization?
Well, some of them had been falling away, but they were, a lot of the coping mechanisms were a lot of like just how I would treat people.
Okay,
And respond
they
and just
weren't
shut them down.
substance or anything like that. Like,
yeah,
as in, like,
I shed the really
booze,
bad ones when we got married. My wife's like, no.
Yeah.
She's like, absolutely not.
Yeah, women tend to do that.
Yeah. The reason why I say that is because, like, there is a culture within the military that is drinking, like heavy drinking.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I know it's wild, right? And it is starting to subside, or at least the unhealthy part of it is starting to subside, and people are starting to just, okay, we're going to drink, but it's going to be a little bit more responsible and throttled a little bit,
Yeah, which I can relate to. I mean, going to Penn State, which always makes top 10 party schools.
Yeah.
That was part of the culture there. We carried that through. Obviously, we'd finished a test operation or something. We were either celebrating or drowning our sorrows, and we'd take it too far. Even as like an adult, as like a dad, like I finally realized a couple years ago, it's like we need to knock this back, like because it would be taking it too far. It's like it's not fun anymore. You know what I mean? Like just have a couple beers and watch the game, and be able to drive safely home. It was like, what are we doing? Like, guys, we're like, guys, we're in our 40s. Like, let's knock this back. Let's get a handle on ourselves.
No,
here.
Man, no. Woo!
Yeah, no, we got to do it right when we're together. I'm like, no, like, let's reevaluate this.
Well, and as a father, right? Like, I don't know. For me, it's I don't ever want to be caught, flat-footed if something happens,
Right.
So like the times that I can let go or do it, it's pretty limited, because it's like I got little people that are relying on me, and while my wife is a formidable human and she would stab somebody, it's still at the end of the day my responsibility to take care of her if anything goes wrong.
That's the problem, is that she is going to stab you.
I mean,
especially if you don't perform, like if you don't freaking take that dude out or whatever. Yeah, like you gotta.
Well, she will definitely critique my performance, even if I win that fight.
Yeah.
And then.
well, what? So the imposter syndrome is nothing is not a stranger to either the three of us at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure the people listening as well, because it is something that everybody deals with, regardless of the career path that you happen to take.
Right.
You know, how do you kind of, okay, so it's awesome you recognize that, but for the rest of the folks out there, like, how can we self-assess and recognize that?
Yeah. Great
Without
question,
somebody helping us, you know?
Yeah. So the first step is, obviously giving a name to something gives you a lot of power over it. So I didn't know what imposter syndrome was probably till 10 years ago. And what it is, I mean, it's rooted in self-doubt. It's when, it can show up any different way. It's like, you're a fake, you don't really know what you're doing. You don't deserve to be here. People are going to find out that you've just been winging it the past 20 years. And this house of cards that you feel like you've built is just going to collapse. So understanding what it is paramount. So, giving a name to it, that self-doubt. But one of the things is understanding, what it does. I say it's a thief. Like it's gonna rob you of your joy. Like I talked about getting that commendation letter and that stuff. It's gonna steal opportunities from you. Like if you don't believe that you're worthy of whatever you already have, like you might not be as likely to pursue the next job, the next, investment property, relationship, whatever, inserted in there. And then the big thing is that it's going to actually rob the people that you're here to serve in whatever situation that is, your community, your family. Like if you play small because, you just feel like you shouldn't even be doing what you're already doing, it's actually affecting other people. So those are some big things. And then also realizing how it shows up in ways that go beyond just feeling like a fake. A woman who's done a lot of work on it, Dr. Valerie Brown on imposter syndrome talks about, it can show up in, 5 different ways. It's like being a superhero. Like, are you the person that always has to be there to save the day? Like sometimes like that just happens, right? Like you just need to step up and you need to help. But it's like, are you continually like raising your hand, like for problems that maybe aren't yours to fix truly? And, so manifesting like that, people that things have always come naturally to, they call it like the natural genius. Might be like, why the hell does a natural genius have a problem with this? Well, when you're growing up and sports or academics come easy to you, which didn't for me, either one of them. But if you're used to things always coming easily to you, when you become an adult, so many different layers of stress get added on, travel, aging parents, kids, job stress, all the things, paying for groceries now, all that, right? If things all of a sudden start becoming difficult, people that things have always come easy to might be like, who the hell am I? What have I been living a lie my whole life? Like I never struggled with anything and now I'm struggling. Now what? Because they even built that muscle of, all right, well, this sucks. Let me figure out how to solve this problem. Because they've just always kind of been a gazelle and cruised through everything. Seeing if you show up as like a lone wolf, where it's like, I don't need any help. No, I don't want any help. No one can help me. I don't need it. Like when I would do these test plans for our test programs, like I always thought I could do it. I could do it myself. I writing these like 90-page procedures with like cranes and hazardous operations and other stuff in it. And like, I wouldn't let other people look at it until like my supervisor was like, hey, Mollura, wrap it up. And it was because, I was like, well, I can do this. I've been doing this for years. What it really was, when I look back on it, I had that lone wolf mentality on that because I didn't want to give people ammunition to show that I was not worthy to be where I was. I didn't want to give someone this document and be like, hey, point my blind spots out, help me out here. Cause I'd be like, oh, now they're going to think I'm not worthy to be here. Other ways that imposter syndrome and self-doubt can show up for people to self-assess is, like a podcast is a great example. Let's say someone has a dream to like launch a podcast, but they spend 2 months researching the microphone, another month researching the headphones. And then they take some, master class on launching the podcast. And then they read a book and it's like, just go. Like no one's going to die. Like just go.
Yeah, maybe
So
we
it's
should have
like, you know,
taken a class, actually.
I was thinking, I was like, wow, they have classes on that.
We're
We
like the
probably should have done a
opposite.
little bit more
Yeah.
research than what we did. The
Sorry.
You guys
three-man
are
wolf
obviously
pack.
doing okay.
Yeah, we're like, hey, check it out. You
Yeah.
just hit record, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and then the final way is, and I always save this for last because people always roll their eyes, is like, are you a perfectionist? Do you have perfectionistic tendencies? And perfectionism, you know, people oftentimes treat it like it's a positive trait. It's like, you know,
I'm a perfectionist.
name something you struggle with. Well, if I have to say I struggle with something, I'm a perfectionist because I just care so much. BS.
I'm a little too perfect. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I care too
Yeah.
much.
I care too much. It's like, I'm not saying ship crap, but there has to be a point, like I said, where you just go and then have the courage to iterate it again.
Yeah.
So self-assessing all those ways are ways to see if self-doubt and imposter syndrome are showing up. And then there's some ways to turn that down. Yeah. Questions or feedback on that stuff?
No, I mean
that
that last thing is one of the things that is well known, probably in the military, but definitely in the soft community. Is, you know, an 80% solution is better now than 100% solution 2 days from now, because you're never going to get to 100%. You've got to be able to execute off of partial information and try and make the best decision. You really do. And then to your point about the, you know, people that haven't had to deal with necessarily struggle, or they have, you know, they're gazelles and they're walking a path that's been laid out for them. I almost don't know. I mean, sure, some of that is based off of their own skill, intelligence, and that kind of stuff, but a lot of it is somebody has kind of paved that path for them and not allowed them to stumble, not allowed them to struggle. You know, and usually it's a parent or grandparents or something like that, you know, I'm just going to take care of everything so that you don't have to. And instead it's like, well, you're not doing little Johnny any favors later on, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a parent or even as like mentors, that's a tough line to walk. Right. And, you know, one of the things my wife and I are very big about, we have 3 kids, you know, 9, 13 and 15, is letting them know, like, hey, we screwed up. We dropped the ball on that. And that's actually been probably one of the best parenting things that we've done, is because now our kids, when they make a mistake, they know it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
They'll raise their hand and be like, yeah, I blew that. I did not do that well.
Ownership.
Or I responded, you know, not in the right way or a healthy way. So yeah, so those are some big things, is admitting your flaws, you know, especially when you're in a leadership position in your family or, you know, your job.
Yeah.
What are some of those other ways that we can start kind of breaking the cycle of the imposter syndrome? We kind of laid out those 5 things, those 5 little, you know, those 5 things that can be, you know, indicative that we're suffering from it, or that we do have a problem with it. And it can be an unconscious thing. You can hear these things and go, oh, wow, I do that. And I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what to give it a name. So how do you start breaking that cycle of imposter syndrome and start actually showing up the way that you want to show up to the world?
Yeah, there's two ways that I always like to point to. Is I call it the archive of awesome. I always tell people, it's like, write down things that you've done well, or things that have made you happy, or that you can, you know, that you can look back on your life and be like, yeah, I actually did that awesome. Because fear, when it crops up, and that negative voice in your head, when it crops up, it's not going to fight fair. It's going to bring things up that happened when you were, you know, just a little person, and it's going to trip you up decades later. So I always say to people, it's like, look, when you're writing down things that you're proud of, don't just write from like the past, like month, 2 months, 2 years, 5 years. Go back as far as you can remember. Because what that does is that starts building the basis that your brain can look back on and be like, okay, I have done some awesome stuff, and I do have what it takes to do whatever is in front of me next. So, you know, if people sign up for like my newsletter, you know, or just, you know, through my website, they actually get kicked out a fillable PDF with their archive of awesome. I'm like, just start typing away. Set a timer on your phone for 10 minutes and just write down cool things you've done that you're proud of. And people are always like, man, I thought 10 minutes was going to be tough to do, but they're like, I went for like 20, 30 minutes. Like, I was like, I've done some boss ass stuff in my life.
Turns
So
out
that's the one that
I'm not terrible.
Yeah, I don't suck as bad as I thought.
So we can get it out there. It's johnmollura.com. So John, common spelling John, Mollura, MOLLURA.com. And that's where you can sign up for the newsletter, see more about John, and see what he's doing on a day-to-day. So I wanted to get that out there for you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and if John Mollura /free stuff, that's right where the button is. People are always like, oh, free stuff.
Nice.
So yeah, but that's and that is actually why I have all this stuff behind me on my wall. Is a lot of these, the letters of commendation I talked about. There's one, and there's the other one. Like all this stuff, mission patches I was on. This stuff all sat in desks and boxes for years, if not decades, because I'd get these awards or these mission patches and be like, yeah, cool. Because I didn't want to like take credit for it. I didn't want to, believe that I didn't feel worthy is what it came down to. And once I started, learning about all this stuff and becoming more comfortable with myself, that's when, I was like, I need to actually put this up because, I'm just like everyone else. Some days I wake up or something happens. It's like, I don't think I got what it takes to pull this off today, like whatever it is. But the cool thing is about having this stuff behind me is when I walk into my office, I'm like, okay, right. That went to Mars. I can make this phone call, right? I can, cold call you guys and ask to be on your podcast. So taking credit for things is a big part of it. And one of the other ways, Aaron, that I always give people a tip or a hack to start turning down the volume of imposter syndrome, because I always say turning down the volume because it never goes away. Just like Trent was saying, like there's always going to be some little bit of anxiety, or you're going to get a new situation. It's going to be like, I don't know if I can do this. But the point of all this is not to make it go away. It's not a switch. It's not like you learn this stuff and people listen to this podcast episode and they'll be like, I'm good to go. Click, no problem now.
Cured.
It's like, no. What we want to do is turn the volume down of it, of that, that negative voice inside your head, turn the volume down and also reduce the time where it trips you up. So one of the biggest things that I know I struggled with for years was accepting a compliment. And like for instance, like there's a guitar beside me. I used to play in a band, and like if people would come up, the unhealthy way to handle a compliment, if someone came up and be like, man, I saw your band last weekend, John, like you guys crushed it. The unhealthy way to say that or to accept that compliment and be like, oh, thanks, brother. How wasted were you? Given some kind of like self-deprecating, thing, because it just feels uncomfortable, right? So one of the ways I tell people, it's like, look, when you do that, two things are happening. Neither one of them are good. The first one is you're giving your brain information that you think it sucks or that you think you suck. And it's just going to file that away. And the other thing that it does is it tells the person that just gave you that compliment, that took the time to say something nice, yeah, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
I don't believe that about myself. What's wrong with you?
They're trying to give you a gift.
Yeah. And you're just like, yeah, whatever. So I always tell people, I'm like, as uncomfortable as it feels, like you need to, just like that archive of awesome that I talk about with your accomplishments, that builds up, the data set, if you will, of good things you've done throughout your life. If you learn to accept a compliment, that also will positively impact you. It builds that data set up. So if then the right way to handle a compliment, John, man, I saw you guys play last week. You guys were awesome. It's a very complicated 3-step process. You might need to write this down. The first step is you just smile at them. Not weird, not creepy, but just smile.
Oh,
Someone says something, just smile at them.
That's Trent's way.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. The awkward smile.
Well, he thinks he's smiling. His face is just completely blank. He's actually just staring you down until you leave his area.
I'm so nice on the inside. I don't understand how it doesn't make it to the outside.
It just doesn't crack the actual face.
So just smile at them. And then I always tell people, it's like, just say thank you. Period. Thank you is a full sentence. It's not thank you, but thank you, blah, blah, blah. It's just, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. And then the third step is just smile again or try to. Trent.
Good trier.
He's the absolute worst. So John, throughout your entire journey here, right? And it's I always love calling it a journey because now like you can use that word unironically. When it first came out, everybody said, "Oh, your journey." They said it too much, and then it fell out of fashion. But now it's back in, and you can say it again. So I'm bringing it back. But throughout this entire journey,
sexy back.
We haven't even hit on your foray into photography and being published in National Geographic and all these other things that you were able to find joy and really present yourself to the world. I like how you said that there was a disconnect in how you wanted to show up to the world and how you were showing up to the world. So brass tacks, somebody once, sees these things in themselves. What's kind of like that first go-do that you give them? Like, hey, you want to start showing up in the world and being, your more authentic and true self. Focus on this. What would that be?
Yeah. So if they're, depending where they are, like if they're in a place where like they're just stuck and they're stagnant, like I'm always like, just start writing down, like you said, good things you've done. Like start building up, retraining your brain about the way you're showing up in the world. And a big piece of advice I always tell people is don't feel like you're starting over. People are always like, man, you went from working in the space program to being a photographer. Like, that's crazy. It's like, they're like, man, that must have sucked to start over like that. It's like, I'm not starting over. I'm taking everything I've learned my entire life, all these skill sets, when they would drop, my team off, at some base and be like, all right, Mollura, you got like 2 weeks to pull off this test on the rocket sled track. Make it happen. Like that skill set, obviously thinking on my feet was a big one, but I was able to develop rapport quickly because I needed to cut through all the red tape. Like I needed to get chemicals on base. I needed to get things that went boom on the base. Like I needed to know who to talk to and also be able to identify with them. So that translated awesome into my photography because I always say it's like, other than a dentist, I'm pretty sure a photographer is the only other occupation where people are like, I'm about to give you like a substantial amount of money and I hate this. I hate being photographed.
That is a great point. As a guy that hates being photographed, I completely get it.
Everybody hates being photographed. Like, they're like, I'm the worst. I look awful in pictures. And I'm like, well, every person that you saw in my portfolio that brought you in here, they all said the same thing. So it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So just getting out of that mindset of I'm starting over. I don't have what it takes to do this. If someone's like seeing these things themselves, they're like, I need to change. Like, and just start finding what lights you up, and it's trial and error. And then just realizing no one's depending what their hobby is, no one's going to die. Like just get out there and start doing stuff and being okay with learning.
It's actually way safer to have someone else take your picture than taking selfies, right? Because I don't know how many of those videos I've seen where that cliff just sneaks up on them and they gone.
Yeah. My buddies and I were laughing about that. Because we tried scheduling this 2 weeks ago. We were out on our annual backcountry trip, and it wound up after 3 days of this like just beautiful vista, and like our legs are just shot, and we like have our packs on. They're like, hey, there's that rock ledge down there. Should we get down there and take like a selfie? I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
I'm like, we're not going to be one of those guys in those videos.
Exactly. You know how many news stories? Like, oh, man, falls 500 feet to his death trying to take a selfie. Not today, Playboy.
Yeah, right. It's like, put it on the packer. Like someone came. It was so funny. It's like we had just got to this vista, and like we're like, man, this is beautiful. These past 3 days, this is so worth it. There's like a road that goes to the top of the vista from the other side. And like these like families come walking out with like their dogs and they're eating like Snickers. I'm like, oh, I guess we could have done that.
Yeah, you thought you took like this crazy backcountry hike. Some girl with like wearing Barbie Crocs shows up like, oh, hey.
Yeah, my 4-year-old just did this in Crocs. Great.
So good.
Yeah.
What was about photography that sucked you in? I'm sorry, I had to step away because kids and stuff. What was it about photography that sucked you in? What the challenge, or was it because the focus is not on you? As we go through this process, I can't help but think of like you're growing up. You have to reprioritize and right size your ego and recognize the things that came before you and recognize what you've done, where your place in the world. But then this photography thing, like you get to focus on other people, which is, I think, is where we all landed as our priorities to get over all the stuff that we've been, all the what is it, imposter syndrome and all those other things that we've been talking about. Geez, we've been talking about for almost an hour and I can't think of it. That's how dumb I am.
I need to rework my curriculum.
Jeez, man, I'm the worst.
It's not landing.
I'm so good. I got to write down all the things I'm good at.
I was going to say, Trent's now showing you his imposter syndrome. Where he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't be on this podcast. I couldn't bring it up right away." And now, like, I saw him spiral there.
Why am I so dumb? Well, what was it about photography that kind of like lit that fire within you to try something fairly new and to step out there and put yourself out there?
Yeah, it was actually a lifelong hobby. When I was 7, I wanted like a hamster for my birthday. And my mom, in her infinite wisdom, knew like this kid doesn't have the discipline to take care of a
You're not
hamster.
ready for it.
Yeah, you're not ready for a 1.5-pound ball of fur, John. So, and she doesn't know why to this day. Like, but she got me a camera. And this is back in the mid 80s. So it was like a film camera. It had like the flash bulbs that actually pop. And I just enjoyed it. I love being able to create something. And I, always looked at things from a different point of view. So that's how my photography started. And the cool thing was when I was doing test operations, they would send me, like I said, I mentioned Antarctica. They'd send me all over the place. Well, I'd always throw my camera in my bag. I'm like, cool, free trip, free photo safari. And just love the being able to create. And I started, with like landscapes and fine art photography, because at that time I didn't have the confidence to photograph people. Like it terrified me, the thought of like telling someone to like do a pose and not having it work out, because this is like, remember, this is like, I was like rooted in like all this imposter syndrome. I didn't feel good about anything in my life that I was doing. So it's like telling someone to do something where they're already uncomfortable and then having me not be able to do it. Like I didn't have the self-confidence for that. But as my confidence grew, I eventually found that I had a very big knack for portrait photography, taking portraits of people, and developed like kind of like a rock and roll kind of style, like real dramatic lighting, and found that I loved working with people who have gone through like a significant valley of their life, because I can obviously identify with that and can tap into my empathy and help them feel comfortable and create these portraits of them that are a gift to them. I mean, they still pay me. It's not a free gift.
Yeah, right.
But the gift is, on those days, like I said, whatever they've gone through, whatever kind of a badass they are, they're still going to wake up and they're going to be like, ugh, I don't think I got it in me to go after whatever it is today. And part of my thing is they always get prints of their photos. So they have a print of frame print on their wall of them in this like badass portrait. And they're like, okay, that person's inside of me somewhere. I'm going to believe I'm that person for 30 seconds. And I'm going to believe it for a minute just to kind of get them through. Like I have a framed picture of myself that my photography mentor took of me hanging up. So I always loved creating, Trent, and photography just evolved into, just a way I can do it and then also serve people.
I think that's a huge part of the process, right? Is that prioritization and seeing how you play into the bigger system, and you get to be a part of these people's, their day or the next couple days or whatever, and a part of their life, and you get to give them something. But I also think you learn something about yourself through your art, right? Like, so like as you go through this process and you're creating this art, it's got to be therapeutic for you as well to kind of see how you fit into the bigger scheme of things and how you're serving other people.
Yeah, and it's such a unique way to serve other people, and the photography, especially the kind that I love to do, it's got enough of the tech with all the flashes and remote triggers and everything that I get to nerd out on it a little bit, and serve myself with that. But one of the things that I love doing is, like I mentioned, like 99.9% of the people come in, they're like, I hate being photographed. And a story sticks out. I was working with a model one time, and I took her, we were doing this photo shoot. And when we were in my studio, the pictures were popping up in real time on my computer screen. And I saw her kind of peek around. She goes, I said, you all right, Molly? She goes, oh my God, you made me look so pretty. And I'm like, what? She goes, you made me look beautiful. She
Like,
said
you're a
that's so
model.
cool.
You get
I'm
paid
like,
for looking
I'm
good.
like, this is how the world sees you. She's like, well, that's not how I see myself. I'm like, all right, well, we're printing this out. And I just talked to her this week. She's like, oh my God, I totally had that printed and framed in my house.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so it's really cool to be able to show people how the rest of the world sees them and build up that, that database for themselves, that they are worthy of love and respect. And, the world sees them differently than they see themselves, especially if they see themselves in a harsh light.
Yeah. But you never want to say you're done, right? Like, how do you know when you're done when you're taking photography? Because we've talked about a lot of things here, and we get a lot of questions. Obviously, we talk to folks that are trying to join the pipeline and making that leap, which we've talked about like 4 times just in this episode. The 80% solution. You go into something where, and I see this with a lot of other artists and a lot of different art forms, is like, how do you know when you're done? How do you know when you've gotten the correct shot? How do you know when you're ready to publish? Make that leap and really put yourself and your art and everything else out there. Like, how hard is it to like finally just be like, okay, we're good here, and I'm going to put this out there for everybody?
Yeah, that's something that takes a lot of practice. Is like, I can remember like just being terrified to like show people pictures I took when I started. Like, it would be like, oh man, I don't know, what are people going to say? And it would take hours, maybe days to like put something out there. And then you realize, oh, I don't suck. People didn't tell me I sucked. Maybe they didn't say anything, but they didn't tell me this was awful. And it comes down to, I always talk a lot about getting the reps in. Like, you got to get the reps in and build that confidence and just be brave. I mean, you got to be brave. And if nothing else, like, work on being like my friend Jazz, who does talking. She talks about being 10% braver. Like, just be 10% braver than you usually are. Like, whatever that looks like for you. And then the cool thing is, it's like the 1% better every day. Like, it's not a curve that goes like this. It goes, eventually if you keep working on it. So just finding that courage and putting yourself out there is the best advice I can give. And know that it will get easier, just like lifting weights, right? And working out.
Yeah, it's probably, and I'd be interested to see what your take it is. This the fake it till you make it kind of thing. I think there's probably a fine line of the fake it till you make it thing. I don't know. What is your kind of take on the fake it till you make it?
Yeah. And with art, it's always like, who gets to say if you're a fake or you're a professional? Like, it's like you're just creating. And I usually don't use the term fake it till you make it, because like, if you're doing the thing, like, you're not a fake, like you're trying, like, you're in the arena. Mm-hmm. Like, you're in there. You might get your ass kicked, but you're in there. So the way I like to rephrase fake it till you make it is, do the thing and recognize your goal is to get better. Like, when I look at stuff I've created, like, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I'm like, oh God, can't believe they paid me for that.
Same.
Which is what you want, actually, because that means that I'm progressing in my skill and what I'm doing and the standards I hold myself to now.
Yeah, no, that's valid. And you had said something, and I didn't want to interrupt earlier when you talked about people's comfort level with doing things. Like, we just got back from the Air Mobility Command's Airlift and Tanker Symposium, where the commander had allowed us to have a booth and all that kind of stuff, and we were interviewing people, just kind of pulling them right off of the convention floor. And a lot of people were like, one, we didn't get everybody that we wanted, that we asked, trying to talk them into it, and they were like, absolutely not, there's no free way, I have nothing to say, why would you want to talk to me? That kind of thing. The other side of it was Aaron and Trent laughed because they're like, yeah, I basically ordered some kid to sit down, but I didn't order him.
Yes,
I was just like,
well, enlisted folks can't order.
Strongly suggested.
You can tell him directly to his face to sit down.
I applied some pressure.
Good way to put it.
So, but the funny thing is he did it, and afterwards he was like, holy cow, that was fun. That was awesome. Like he really, really enjoyed it. And it's like, yeah, man, just sit down and do it. And, you know, when we first started doing this, and it's not that, you know, we're no Joe Rogan or Drinking Bros or any of those guys, right? But I remember talking to the Black Rifle dude, Jared Taylor, and he's like, dude, you just have to hit record. Just have to hit record. That's it. You don't need all this stuff. You just hit record and go. And that's like now it's like, yeah, whatever. Let's hop on real quick. We can hit record and it's no big deal. But the first probably 50 episodes was like, all right, we need to think this through. We've got to have an outline. We've got to have, you know, like, is everything set? Like, oh my God, you know, I mean, since we got back on this trip, I set up the studio in here with all the lights and cameras about 15 minutes before we started, and just like right in, hit record, and okay, so yeah, we did a little bit of research on you, but not much, because I want to find out about you. I don't want to find out about you and your story from, you know, things that are read on Google. I want to talk to you, which is why a lot of times, like, Trent and Aaron are laughing right now because they know, like, I'm pretty quiet when we first step on here, and I don't like to have a lot of preamble talking. I just want to hit record and then let's go, because I don't want to lose. One, I don't want to lose content. I don't want to rehash things. It's interesting. It's my own little things.
Yeah, but a lot of that comes from you've put in the reps. Like, you know, you had an outline, and you just naturally learn what works, what doesn't work. And, you know, you just go from there because you've put in the reps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, is there anything else on imposter syndrome or photography that, or I mean, NASA, rock climbing on Mars, which is still on the to-do list.
Legit.
But is there anything else you want to hit before we wrap?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to always end, you know, all my talks, you know, from stage. Like, I just want people to know that, like, they're worthy. Like, they're truly worthy of the good things that people say about them. They're truly worthy of the good things that happen to them. They're worthy of the accolades that they've received. And, you know, I'm always happy to, you know, chat with people, you know, shoot me a DM. You know, I always love hearing people's stories, where they're at, because a lot of times people don't give themselves enough credit for what they have accomplished in their life. And, you know, to kind of sometimes serve as a mirror for people to help them see themselves in a better light is awesome, because people truly are worthy of those good things.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice, especially to our demographic that's, you know, anywhere between 15 and 35. So that's solid. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate your time,
and
guys.
then you want to say your social medias real quick, since you do it out there?
Yeah,
we'll just double tap it.
Cool. Free publicity, that'll work. Yeah, the website is John Mollura, JohnMollura/free stuff, all one word. And, you know, you can get your own archive of awesome sent to you right away. There's also a button there to schedule a free call with me. You know, just to see where you're at, because I offer everything from, like, you know, self-paced online workshops on imposter syndrome, where we dig into what we talked about more, all the way through 12-week personal coaching with men and women. So to really help them dig in and understand who they authentically are. So interested in that, johnmollura.com/free stuff. And then all the socials, I'm pretty much the only John Mollura out there.
Nice. You got that branding just locked.
I got that locked in.
Awesome. Well, everybody that's out there, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and then we appreciate everything that you do for us in terms of support. One'sReady.com for some merch and some Attack League gear if you're so inclined. So appreciate you, everybody out there. Later.
Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, guys. Take it easy.